Welcome to the English Epics channel. Our son Jonathan left for school 8 months ago, leaving Mary and me, both 45 years old, alone. We were proud of our son and his scholarship to Oxford University. In this new chapter of solitude, we needed to rebuild our relationship and start a new life without children. I assumed that our sexual life would immediately improve and that we would return to the frequent and enjoyable intimacy we used to share. However, during the first 2 months, Mary seemed a bit down as she missed her baby being away. Additionally, I think she realized that she was about to turn 46 and noticed new wrinkles on her face and a few extra pounds. From my perspective, these changes only emphasized her beauty, but I believe she felt that life was passing her by and that the years of fun and excitement were behind her. After doing some research, I learned that this reaction was completely normal. I made an effort to give her positive feedback, shower her with compliments, and allow her time to adjust to our new family dynamic. A few months passed. On Friday evening, she came home from work, happy and excited, as if she were 20 years younger. Smiling and radiant, she seemed like a new woman. We spent the weekend reconnecting, making up for the years we had devoted to responsibilities that were no longer part of our lives. As I was getting ready for bed, Mary surprised me with her newfound passion and energy. She approached me with a playfulness I hadn't seen in years, and her spontaneity was both unexpected and refreshing. It was clear that she wanted to rekindle the spark in our relationship, and we embraced this renewed intimacy with open hearts. That night, we explored a closeness that felt both familiar and new, sharing moments of deep connection that brought us closer than ever. Mary's confidence and willingness to express herself were exhilarating, and I couldn't help but admire this side of her. Throughout the weekend, we continued to rediscover each other, strengthening our bond in ways we hadn't imagined. Our relationship reached a level of emotional and physical intimacy that left us both feeling fulfilled and grateful. The next morning, I woke up with Mary snuggled close to me. Smiling, I said, "Good morning, gorgeous. Last night was amazing. What got into you? Whatever it was, I definitely wanted to continue." "I love you, sweetheart," she replied, her eyes filled with warmth. She gave me a playful, affectionate touch, and we shared another moment of closeness before heading downstairs for breakfast. For the first time in years, I felt that our intimacy had returned to its former glory, and we were beginning the next chapter of our life together. What I didn't know at the time, but later discovered, was that it wasn't me, but a man from Mary's workplace who had reignited her sexual desire to such a high level. Over the past 6 weeks, he had shown interest in Mary. His compliments and flirtation brought back a sense of youth and confidence in her. While this clearly helped us in the bedroom, it created unexpected challenges in the months that followed. 3 months later, our life was going well, and financially we were secure with jobs we both enjoyed. Jonathan was doing great in school, and over the past 3 months, our intimacy had remained wonderful, bringing us closer than ever. I still didn't know what had sparked her heightened passion, but I cherished every moment of it. Our intimate life was full of connection and excitement, and we explored a newfound level of closeness. It felt like heaven, and I was glad that Mary seemed as happy as I was, that I took pride in fulfilling her needs, feeling like I had stepped into a new, improved chapter of our relationship. Friday evenings were our traditional date nights. Every Friday after work, we would go to an early movie, have dinner, then rush home and make love until we fell asleep in each other's arms. We adhered to this ritual without fail to keep the spark alive and to maintain a sense of life outside the routine. We both enjoyed our Friday night dates and used them as a way to recapture a bit of our youth and relive the excitement of earlier days. Compared to others our age, we were more intimate than most of our friends, and I made a conscious effort to keep the passion alive. On this particular Friday evening, she asked if we could go out for drinks after dinner. She playfully squeezed my leg and gave me a mischievous look that seemed to say, "I'll make it worth your while," accompanied by a sly smile. She wanted to check out a new club she'd heard about from her coworkers called The Haven, which was just a 10-minute drive away. The club was lively with a fantastic jazz band playing live music. We had a couple of drinks at the bar, and Mary was even more affectionate than usual. I loved her energy and couldn't wait to get her home. Her playful demeanor had me on edge, and at one point I felt her hand brush against me, teasingly lingering for a moment. Her touch, even through my trousers, left me longing for what was to come. She smiled and gave me a gentle kiss on the lips, continuing to caress me to the brink of release but stopping just short, teasing me further by nibbling on my earlobe and whispering suggestive things in my ear. I wanted to take her right there, in the bar, but at that moment, the band stopped playing, forcing us to pause our public display of affection. As the band took a break, I was finishing my third martini when a man I didn't recognize approached us and loudly called out in a deep baritone voice, "Mary, is that you? You look stunning tonight." I must have had a shocked expression on my face when I saw Mary's smile quickly shift to a concerned look. She wasted no time introducing us to each other. "Hi, Brandon. How nice to see you, Brandon." "This is my husband, Charlie," she said as he embraced her. A wave of jealousy washed over me as my intuition told me something was off. Even in my slightly inebriated state, I could piece together the coincidences: the cheerful mood at home, the new bar, my wife being unusually affectionate, and now this random encounter with a man she clearly knew, right in the very bar she wanted us to visit. I had no evidence, no concrete reason to suspect anything inappropriate, but from that moment on I was on high alert. Brandon looked as though he was in his early 40s, handsome, with a voice like Barry White's. I could only imagine how many women had swooned listening to that deep, sensual voice. He was friendly and an excellent conversationalist. After another drink, I started to relax and think that maybe his arrival was just a coincidence. He stayed with us for about 20 minutes. The jazz band started playing again, and everything seemed fine, until he asked me if I wouldn't mind him inviting my wife to dance, before I could even answer. Mary stood up and said, "Of course he doesn't mind, right, darling?" She led him to the dance floor before I could respond. I was furious, realizing this might have been planned. After 3 slow dances, I almost left her there and went home, but I decided to stay and see how this would play out. As I watched, small details began to irritate me. For instance, the way Brandon held my wife a little too close. I was unsettled by how she rested her head on his shoulder and wrapped her arms around his neck. I was bothered by how he leaned in to whisper in her ear. Alarm bells were ringing in my head, and I realized my intuition hadn't failed me. Trouble was brewing. When they returned, they acted as though nothing had happened, and Brandon started a new conversation, as if slow dancing with my wife was the most normal thing in the world. Brandon spoke very highly of my wife, praising how much she had helped him at work. When he asked me about my hobbies and what I liked to do, Mary quickly stepped in and answered for me, almost as if it had been rehearsed. "Oh, Charlie loves watching football and is the biggest Manchester fan. He never misses a single game on TV. Charlie, is that true? Did you know there's a playoff game tomorrow? Are you planning to watch it?" "Yes, my friend Jake and I never miss a match. We'll be at the pub enjoying their victory over Liverpool." "Well, Charlie, old sport. Today's your lucky day. You see, I happen to have 2 tickets to the game that one of my suppliers just gave me. And since I'm not much of a football fan, I was planning to give them away." He pulled out an envelope and showed me 2 tickets. They were incredible seats, impossible to get, and yet there they were. I immediately understood what was happening. He was like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, handing Eve the apple and offering her a bite. I replied hesitantly, "Wow, those are amazing tickets. You should go and enjoy the game." "Not my thing, old sport. Listen, I'm not going to use them, so I'd love for you to have them and enjoy the match. I mean, as Mary's husband, it would be an honor for me if you took them." And there it was. My anger burned red hot. I knew exactly what was happening, but I took the tickets anyway. If he had called me old sport one more time, I swear I would have torn his throat out. Calmly, I said, "Thank you, Brandon. That's very generous of you. I'm sure Mary and I will enjoy the game." I knew exactly what to expect when I heard my wonderful wife's voice. "Oh, no, darling, I hate going to those games. You should take Jake. I mean, you two would enjoy it so much more than I would. Don't worry about me, I have plenty to do. So it's settled, you're going with Jake tomorrow." At that moment, I wasn't sure how far their relationship had progressed. I didn't know if she was already involved with him or if she was planning to betray our marriage. But it was obvious that she wanted him, and I was being pushed aside. Clearly, she underestimated my determination and cunning when I decided to observe how this would unfold. I had no hard evidence, only my intuition, what I saw on the dance floor, and the unmistakable atmosphere in the bar that night. So I decided to let it play out and see where it led while making plans along the way that I had no intention of sharing my wife, no matter how many playoff tickets or how much money was offered. If she wanted to play games with someone else, she was free to do so, but I wouldn't be part of it. Her fate would be decided. I saw Brandon for what he truly was. He was a refined man, handsome with a seductive voice. Yes, he seemed fun, intelligent, successful, and charming qualities that would attract any woman over 40. But the problem was that the woman he was seducing was married, and she wasn't on the menu. Brandon was one of those predators who enjoyed the thrill of seducing married women and turning their husbands into fools. It gave him power, boosted his ego, and provided free, no-strings-attached sex. I saw him for what he truly was: pure evil. Mary was in high spirits from the drinks and the time she had spent with Brandon. She didn't even notice that I hadn't said a word since we left the bar. She was incredibly aroused when we got home, but I was still furious. I faked a headache, blaming it on too much alcohol. Pretending to fall asleep, I felt her lie down beside me, using her fingers to release all the excitement she had built up that evening. Jake and I did go to the playoff game, though I wasn't completely naive. Before leaving the house, I strategically placed 2 voice-activated recorders I picked up that morning, and I enabled the Find My app on her phone while she was in the shower. Since both Brandon and Mary knew I wouldn't be home, I was certain they'd either spend time together or discuss what had happened at the bar the previous night. To my surprise, she didn't leave the house while I was at the game, and the devices I'd set up didn't capture anything noteworthy. I was still suspicious and remained on high alert, waiting to see what would happen next. When I got home from the game, Mary was beautifully dressed and had prepared an excellent dinner for me. After a firm kiss and loving embrace, she led me into the kitchen. "How was the game, darling? Did we win?" "Yes, Manchester won 3-1. You must be so thrilled to have watched the game from such great seats." That was so thoughtful of Brandon. Yes, very thoughtful, and the seats were fantastic. Mary seemed pleased and was smiling all evening. To my dismay, from that day forward, I kept hearing about Brandon, about work, their lunches together, how successful he was, his cottage by the lake, his travels, and what a great guy he was. My patience was wearing thin. Then, one evening, she came home excited and happy, hugged me tightly, and kissed me more passionately than usual. Well, that was a sweet greeting. "What's going on? You won't believe this, but do you know the opera La Traviata?" "Yes, you've talked about it for years. Why do you ask?" "Well, there's a performance at the Royal Opera House this Friday." "Mary, you know I hate opera. Do you really want to go?" "Yes, I do, but you don't have to come. And here's the really good news. You see, I had lunch with Brandon today, and he told me he just got amazing tickets to the opera. Another supplier gave them to him, just like the ones he gave you for the playoff game. When he heard that I'd always wanted to see La Traviata, he offered me the tickets. But he seemed a bit disappointed when I told him how much you hate opera and wouldn't go. Then, he had a brilliant idea. He offered to take me himself to see the opera of my dreams and then treat me to a nice dinner afterward. Isn't that so thoughtful of him, darling? How very generous. What a nice guy, I said sarcastically, then added. But of course you turned him down. Well, no, why would I do that? I mean, I know you don't want to go, and it's not a big deal. You don't mind if I go with Brandon, do you? It is a big deal. The important thing is that you don't go on a date with another man. Whether I'm home or away, that's not something a wife does. Frankly, I'm shocked that you'd even consider agreeing to something like that, I said, fully aware that this had all been carefully orchestrated. Oh my God, I didn't think of it as a date. I'm sorry, you've misunderstood. You know Brandon, he's our friend. I mean, he gave you those amazing playoff tickets, and you had a great time. He paid for all our drinks and has been a good friend to me at work. I'm sure you understand. Smiling to myself, I decided to give her enough rope to hang herself and see where this would lead. Well, yes, he's done all that, and he seems like a nice guy. However, I feel uncomfortable with the idea of my wife going out with another man. I'd prefer if you didn't go and avoided doing anything foolish, but you're an adult and can make your own decisions. Still, you know what I want. She must have noticed my anger and dissatisfaction. All right, darling, you don't need to worry. I understand. I didn't mean to upset you, and I'll drop it for now. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. My feelings are fine. I'm concerned about my wife. She came over and kissed me on the forehead. Don't overthink it, silly. I love you and it was never a date. Now stop being jealous and let's move on from this. We dropped the subject, but I didn't forget. Later that night, when she wanted to be intimate, I told her I had a headache as I was still too angry and hurt by our conversation. I still wasn't sure if she was having a sexual relationship with him, but she was certainly starting an affair with him, whether she realized it or not. I knew that if I didn't put an end to it, there could be serious trouble ahead. If she had already slept with him, then it was over between us. This situation with Brandon was becoming a much bigger problem, and I told her that constantly hearing about him was making me a little jealous. I asked her to stop meeting him for lunch. She protested and pushed back against me. Charlie, I turned down the opera tickets like you asked, but now you're being ridiculous. I'm not going to stop being his friend, and if that means having lunch with him occasionally, then you're going to have to be a little more understanding. Of course I was furious, but I needed to figure out exactly what I could do about this without causing a deeper rift in our marriage. Shortly after that, in addition to their lunches, they started going out for drinks after work. When I confronted her about having an affair, she swore that there was nothing sexual between them, insisting she simply enjoyed his company. So Brandon doesn't attract you? Don't lie to me, Mary. Well, every girl in the office likes him, baby. People are already talking about me, and I haven't even done anything. But you want to, don't you? What girl wouldn't? I mean, he's so handsome, and that voice is mesmerizing, but you have nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. How would you feel if I were going out for lunch and drinks off hours with a woman I wanted to sleep with? Something tells me you wouldn't be so understanding. That conversation didn't go very well, and things got a bit frosty at home for a few days. She was furious at the thought of me being with another woman and made it clear that it wasn't an option. Then she told me she'd cut off my balls if I ever cheated, that I thought she was being irrational and wasn't thinking straight, but I had a bad feeling that our future as husband and wife was in serious jeopardy. And then it happened. One evening she came home 3 hours late, without calling, leaving me worried sick. She walked in as if nothing had happened and came over to kiss me, acting as though everything in the world was fine. To her shock, I pushed her back and, with a murderous glare, said something vile that made it clear exactly how I felt about our situation. Well, it's nice you finally came home. Did you have sex with your friend tonight? My wife had never heard me speak to her that way before. She immediately apologized and explained that her phone had died, she lost track of time, and it would never happen again. Were you with Brandon? Mary lowered her eyes and said nothing. I was furious and made it absolutely clear that our marriage was on thin ice if this continued. Mary, let me be clear. If I find out that you've already slept with him, or if you've had any kind of intimate relationship with him, we're done. I will not live with an adulteress, and I will not tolerate being lied to. This shook her, and she swore she had remained faithful, apologized, and promised to stop. For the first time, I believed that Mary had finally grasped the seriousness of my demands. She truly stopped talking about him and his greatness. However, she continued going out with him for lunch and drinks without telling me. The only thing that stopped was me having to hear about their time together or how wonderful he was. 2 weeks later, during dinner, I finally asked her if she had stopped having lunch and drinks with Brandon. She touched my hand and smiled at me as if I were a child trying to soothe my emotions. In a sympathetic tone, she admitted that she was still meeting with him, but had decided not to tell me so as not to hurt my feelings. To my disbelief, she didn't realize how angry or hurt I was upon hearing her confession. What she said next made my head explode, as it was something no reasonable man would ever tolerate. Baby, you know I love you, and Brandon is just a friend. The thing is, he wants to invite me to a corporate dinner tonight because his date canceled on him. He needs a companion, and since we're such good friends, I told him I'd go with him, and that you wouldn't mind. Shaking my head in disbelief, I replied, No, I don't agree with this. So no, you can't go with him. Damn it, Mary, you're still my wife. At least for now. Charlie, stop being a jealous old fool. He's our friend, and he needs my help. I'm going, and you'll just have to trust me. I promise you'll be fine. An old fool? What the hell? This guy had gotten to her, and now she was calling me an old fool. Mary, if you leave, I promise you that I won't be fine, and there won't be anything good between us. I can't physically stop you, but the answer is no. You can't go. Obviously, there was no sex that night, or for the next week. I barely spoke to her because of my anger and frustration over this whole situation with Brandon. She seemed to understand and stopped bringing him up or pushing me about the dinner. The next day, after her confession, Brandon called me at work. Apparently, Mary had given him my number, hoping he could convince me to change my mind. She was definitely going to hear about this when I got home later that evening. Charlie, old sport, how are you? Brandon, what a surprise. What can I do for you? I asked, curious to see what the predator had in mind. Well, I called to apologize. I'm sure Mary told you that I asked her to help me by being my companion for the corporate event. I realize now that was a mistake, and I'm sorry if it caused any problems at home. Yes, it was quite shocking, and I shared my feelings with her. Yeah, she told me about that. You see, my mistake was not calling you first and asking for your permission, rather than putting Mary in such a position. That's what I should have done, man to man. I sat there stunned. The audacity of this guy was unbelievable. Listening to his confident, hypnotic voice felt surreal, and it only made me angrier. So, old sport, let me make it up to you and ensure you get whatever you want. I can arrange season tickets to Manchester if that would work for you. Brandon, are you asking me to trade my wife for football tickets? Are you trying to turn my wife into a prostitute? Friendship in exchange for goods? Is that how little you think of her? Listen, I think you've misunderstood me. I don't share my wife with anyone. And if you call me old sport one more time, I swear I'll rip your tongue out the next time we meet. Now, I'm perfectly capable of buying my own tickets. Let's just leave all this in the past, all right? I must insist that you leave Mary alone and find another woman to accompany you, I said, my voice laced with unmistakable anger. It was as if he hadn't heard a single word I said and simply continued talking. Charlie, my friend, I'm sorry you feel this way, because I really like Mary, and I wanted to ask your permission to allow her to accompany me to my event. I wanted your blessing. Please don't be upset with Mary. Even if she wants to go, it's my fault. So have you reconsidered letting her be my date for this one evening? Brandon, listen carefully. No, just stop asking. She's not going with you, and that's final. In fact, I want you to stop having lunch with her and meeting after work for drinks. This is starting to affect our marriage, and I'm sure you can understand how I feel. Charlie, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we're just friends, and I'm not going to stop being her friend because of your insecurity. I'm sorry you won't let me do this favor for you. After everything I've done for you, I gave you those amazing football tickets and even offered you season passes, but you don't seem to appreciate my generosity. Screw you. I've already thanked you for the tickets, and as I said, I can buy my own football tickets. Now, back off and stop meddling in my marriage, I said, slamming the phone down on my work desk. That evening, I came home to a very subdued Mary. Apparently, she'd heard about my conversation with Brandon and didn't know how to act. Finally, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. I heard about your conversation with Brandon today. Did you really have to be so rude? You hurt his feelings. The look I gave her after she asked if I needed to be so rude could have frozen our pond in the middle of summer. To hell with him and his feelings. I'm curious, why are you so concerned about his feelings and not about your husband? And why did you give him my work phone number? Do you really need to be with him that badly? Maybe I should just leave so you can be with your new boyfriend. She lowered her eyes and said, I was hoping you two could become good friends. So we could all go out together. I'm sorry it turned out this way. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Are you out of your mind, woman? I don't want anything to do with him, and I told him to stop taking you out for lunch and drinks. In case you've forgotten, you're a married woman. Start acting like one, or this will end badly, I assure you. That angered her, and she snapped back, stop acting like a jealous teenager. We've been married for 20 years and nothing is going to happen. I hope you're right. I'd hate to think I wasted the last 20 years on the wrong woman. That comment seemed to shake her, and I hoped it would make her come to her senses. Nothing more was said that night, and once again, there was no intimacy. In fact, I started sleeping in our son's room because I was so angry at her actions and comments that I needed space to clear my head. Mary was upset that I had moved to another room and spent the next few weeks trying to make amends. She said she had stopped meeting Brandon for lunch and tried to be a more loving wife. Eventually, I started sleeping in our bed again, but I still wasn't ready to be intimate with a woman who clearly had feelings for another man. She didn't like this and made several attempts to lift my mood. Deep down, I knew she was still seeing Brandon, and my intuition told me to stay vigilant if I wanted to save my marriage. Unfortunately, I discovered the date of Brandon's event while going through text messages on my wife's phone. We didn't have passwords on our phones, and I had never spied on her before, so secrecy wasn't an issue. Reading her plans upset me because I knew things between us were about to change. What I learned also made my own planning significantly easier. To my surprise, her attempts to play the loving wife over the past few weeks have been a strategy to win me back and help me forget about the Brandon problem. What I discovered was that my cunning wife was planning to break the news that she was actually going to Brandon's event next, Thursday evening. Then a thought occurred to me. I wanted to see whether she would go with him or stay loyal, knowing I had forbidden her from being with him. So, the next morning at breakfast, I announced that I had a meeting in London on the 22nd and wouldn't be home until late the following evening. Knowing that Brandon's event was scheduled for the 22nd, I gave her the opportunity to either betray me by going to the event or confess everything and tell me about her plans. Either way, I wasn't going to stick around. If she openly declared her plans and went to the party, I would move out and file for a separation. If she went without telling me, it would mean the end of our marriage. Unfortunately, she remained silent and didn't tell me about her plans. She continued deceiving me, pretending to be a loving and perfect wife. Every evening I enjoyed delicious dinners, a clean house, and tender kisses when I came home from work, but there was no mention of Brandon or the upcoming event. On Thursday morning, I kissed her goodbye, knowing it would be for the last time, and headed to my office. Having no intention of going to London, I planned to spend the night at the same hotel where the event was taking place. During this time, I met with a lawyer and arranged to have divorce papers prepared along with a potential filing date. I offered double the fee to have the process server stay with me at the hotel where the event was being held and deliver the papers upon my approval. If she did what I believed she was going to do, it would be over between us. Brandon's dinner invitation. I sat in the lobby, discreetly dressed in a COVID face mask, dark sunglasses, and a baseball cap, reading a newspaper with a clear view of the entrance. Sure enough, at 8 p.m., Brandon walked into the hotel arm in arm with my beloved wife. She was wearing a little black dress, dark stockings and high heels flaunting her bold, petite figure. Evidently, she had decided to forego wearing a bra for the occasion. They laughed and greeted those around them in a cheerful, celebratory manner, as if they were a loving couple. I had fully expected them to show up, but I wasn't prepared to see their intimate behavior so openly on display. Somehow I managed to contain my anger and recorded the scene on my phone. Later, I shared the footage with my son when I explained why his mother and I were divorcing. Watching her with Brandon, I called her phone and saw Mary glance at the screen to see who was calling before sending the call to voicemail. Seeing her reject my call and turn her attention back to Brandon felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. All my love and years of devotion to Mary were flushed down the drain that I felt my eyes well up with tears, but somehow I managed to hold them back. I left a few voicemails in a desperate attempt to salvage what little we had left. Hey baby, it's 8 p.m. I hope you're okay since your phone went to voicemail. I love you so much and miss you. I hoped she would listen to the messages, feel some guilt, and leave the party before things went too far. There was still a chance if she left the party or called me and confessed the end of our marriage. She didn't even listen to the messages that evening. I stayed through dinner, watching them from a distance. It was clear she was closer to him than she had let on, as they behaved like a couple throughout the entire evening. I was cautious and stayed out of sight. Around 10 p.m., after several dances and kisses, it became evident that they were leaving the party together. From her earlier message, I already knew he had a room at the hotel, and for £100 I got the room number from the concierge. Kim, the process server, arrived right on time at 10 p.m., and we discussed my plans. I happily gave her an extra £200 for her assistance. At 11 p.m., Kim and I took the elevator up and approached the room. Kim knocked on the door, and we heard some movement inside as I positioned myself to the side of the peephole. A low voice came from the room. "Who is it?" Kim held her badge up to the peephole and said, "Security, please open the door." He obviously didn't examine the badge Kim showed him, but it worked, and we heard the door unlock. It opened just enough to reveal Brandon's face, and before he could say anything, I stepped in front of Kim and forcefully shoved the door open, causing Brandon to stumble backward. He fell to the floor, naked in shock. A gasp came from inside the room as he rolled toward Mary. Her gasp turned into a loud scream when she saw me standing there, facing her exposed body, standing there with a white fluid dripping down her legs. It was painfully clear what had just happened as Brandon lay naked on the floor. I planted my foot on his neck. Pressing all 90 kilograms of my weight onto his throat, I ordered him not to move. I motioned to Kim, who then approached Mary and handed her the divorce papers. Kim informed her that she'd been served and snapped a photo of Mary standing there, naked, with the envelope in her hands. Mary's face was a mask of shock as I took off my wedding ring and threw it toward the wet stain on the bed. Mary saw the pain in my eyes and finally realized the full consequences of her choices. Suddenly she wanted me, not her boyfriend. But it was too little, too late. "Charlie, I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake, and I don't want to lose you. I know this looks bad, but you know I love you, and I don't want a divorce. Please let me come back home, and I'll explain everything and fix it. Please don't do this." I simply shook my head in disbelief, looking at the woman with the empty mind standing before me. For the first time, I realized just how old and out of shape she looked. Seeing her standing there naked with evidence of Brandon's actions dripping down her leg was revolting. After witnessing everything, any feelings I once had for this woman vanished. The love I'd felt for her all these years had now been replaced with contempt and disgust. This was the final act of our marriage. Standing over Brandon, my foot still pressed against his neck, I ordered Kim to leave me alone with the cheating pair. Once the door closed, I turned to my wife and spoke with the voice of a man both desperate and enraged. Congratulations, you've broken my heart and ended our 20 years of life together. And you did it in the worst possible way. You lied to me, betrayed me, and then let this piece of garbage sleep with you. Because of that, our time together is over. Just sign the divorce papers and don't you dare come back home until noon on Saturday. I'll need a day to move my things out of the house. You can stay in our apartment until it's sold, which won't take long. In the meantime, maybe you can move in with this bastard, I said, lifting my foot off his neck and dropping it onto his exposed groin, that I stomped on him one more time to make sure I hit the mark. I did, and the sound of a man in excruciating pain echoed as I walked out of the room for the last time. Brandon's fate. Brandon lost both of his testicles after they were crushed against the floor. He tried to press charges, but I told Mary that if she testified on behalf of that piece of trash, I'd tell her family about her affair and show them the photos. She made the right choice and told the police she didn't recognize the man who injured him. Brandon was furious and felt betrayed by the woman he had stolen from me. After 2 months of trying to get me to talk to her, Mary reluctantly signed the divorce papers. When she finally realized the marriage was beyond saving, she told our son the whole story. To her credit, she took responsibility for destroying our happy years together. We sold the apartment, divided our money, and went our separate ways. Brandon was done with Mary and wanted nothing more to do with her, now a single woman. He told her to back off and find herself a new man. For a 46-year-old divorcee carrying an extra 10 kilograms, the options were limited, especially when she wasn't as desirable as she thought after the predator had tarnished her reputation. After 6 months of hitting the gym, I regained my confidence, got into great shape, and met a lovely 37-year-old divorced woman with a 9-year-old daughter. Patricia had an incredible figure, appreciated a loyal and loving man, and treated me like a king. I got along wonderfully with her daughter, Melissa, and I enjoyed spoiling her. By the time Jonathan graduated, Mary was 50 years old and looked her age. She was alone and was satisfied with how her life had turned out. From Jonathan, I learned how upset she was when she saw me with my new family. Watching me happy with my beautiful new wife and adorable daughter left her feeling sad and envious. Mary told our son how much she regretted her actions and how poorly she had treated me. She still couldn't forgive herself for letting that jerk seduce her. She told Jonathan that losing my love made her realize what she had thrown away and how much she missed her former life. All the pain and loss were the result of her selfish desires. On the other hand, my life changed for the better in less than a year after the divorce was finalized. Patricia's ex-husband had cheated on her, so she understood how much pain that caused. She vowed never to do anything like that to me or our happy marriage. We remained married and faithful to each other for the next 30 years, enjoying the blessings of 3 grandchildren from Melissa and Jonathan. We never heard from Brandon again after his injury. Mary never remarried and spent the next 20 years as a lonely old woman, unable to forgive herself for betraying me, her husband and destroying her happy life. Jonathan married a wonderful woman, gave us another grandchild, and grew close to my new family. I only saw Mary at Jonathan's events and at her funeral. Nothing hurts more than turning someone you loved into a life lesson. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English CPICs. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.